This is a reading of the article that goes along with Civil War Handout number 1, titled The Bloodiest Day. After a successful summer campaign, Confederate General Robert E. Lee decided it was time to take the war to the north. Lee had several reasons for pursuing this course. He wanted to move the fighting out of Virginia. He hoped to convince Maryland, a slave-holding border state that had remained in the Union, to join the Confederacy. He also thought that a successful invasion would influence the upcoming midterm elections in the North. It was a bold move, but Lee knew that Major Union General George B. McClellan would be slow to pursue him. Newly reinstated, McClellan had his hands full reorganizing his Army of the Potomac. Lee was also confident that McClellan would have trouble finding the Confederate Army once it disappeared into the mountain passes west of Washington, D.C. By September 7th, all units of Lee's Army of Northern Virginia were on the north side of the Potomac River. In another daring move, Lee decided to divide his army into 5 parts. Issuing Special Order No. 191 from his headquarters near Frederick, Maryland, Lee sent his troops on their way. 3 columns moved on Harper's Ferry to push back Union forces there. 1 unit headed to Hagerstown, Maryland. The 5th unit guarded Lee's rear at South Mountain, Maryland. Lee's plan encountered a glitch. Several days after Lee left Frederick, the Union Army entered the town. Private Barton Mitchell found a copy of Lee's Special Order No. 191 wrapped around 3 cigars lying in the grass. Mitchell quickly passed the order up the Union chain of command. The discovery gave McClellan the information he needed to organize a surprise attack on Lee. But McClellan didn't move fast enough. Word trickled back to Lee of heightened activity in the Union camp, causing Lee to be concerned, and began to formulate a plan of his own. The 2 armies first clashed at South Mountain on September 14th. After retreating from that location, Lee sent word for his scattered army to come back together at Sharpsburg, Maryland. The morning of September 17, 1862, dawned peacefully in the farming community of Sharpsburg. On Sharpsburg Ridge, on the west side of Antietam Creek, Lee's army stretched for about 3 miles. Running behind the Confederate lines was Hagerstown Pike. Lee planned to use this road to transport troops back and forth along the front lines. But the Confederates also had their backs to the Potomac River. For McClellan on the east side of the creek, the plan was simple: drive the Confederates into the river. If Lee were defeated here, his army would be destroyed. The battle began at dawn. Union Major General Joseph Hooker struck the Confederate left flank under Major General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson in the Miller cornfield north of town. The fighting raged for more than 2 hours. Hooker's men advanced nearly as far as the Dunkard Church. A charging Texas brigade pushed the Union soldiers back. The Texans were themselves forced out of the cornfield with heavy casualties. Union reinforcements arrived for Hooker, and the pressure on the Confederate left flank crumbled Jackson's lines. As Confederate soldiers streamed back across the cornfield, more Union troops arrived under General William Sumner. Sumner personally led a charge of 5,400 men across the open fields towards the Confederate lines. Meanwhile, more than 5,000 Confederate reinforcements under General Lafayette McLaws and General William Walker were advancing. They hit the Union division hard. This phase of battle, named the West Woods Massacre, lasted about 20 minutes. When the smoke cleared, more than 2,000 Union soldiers lay dead or wounded. Elsewhere, a Union division under General William French attacked a Confederate line in a lane known locally as Hog's Trough Road. Over the years, erosion had turned the road into a natural trench. Confederate General D.H. Hill was determined to hold the road against the rush of Union soldiers. Waiting until the enemy was within easy range, the Southerners then let loose with a volley that killed or wounded nearly everyone in French's front ranks. The fighting raged as both sides received reinforcements. General Israel Richardson's division joined French's men. General Richard Anderson's men moved up to assist Hill's defenders in the road. That Confederate line held until noon. Some of Richardson's men got in the road. The Confederate line dissolved, and the survivors of Hill's and Anderson's divisions fled to a nearby farm. The Union breakthrough left a gaping hole in the Confederate center, but Richardson's advance met stiff resistance and a counterattack by just 200 Southerners led by Hill himself. The final blow to the Union attack came when Richardson was mortally wounded. Without a commander, the Union push was weakened and the fighting ended. More than 5,000 men became casualties in the battle for the road. It was thereafter known as Bloody Lane. By 1 p.m., the fighting had shifted to Rohrbach Bridge, southeast of town. Union Major General Ambrose Burnside had been trying all morning to get his men across Antietam Creek. Although Burnside had more than 1,200 troops, 450 Confederate sharpshooters prevented his passage. The Confederates put up a brave defense until they ran low on ammunition. They were finally forced back by a Union division that had forded the creek downstream. Instead of advancing, Burnside allowed his soldiers to rest, regroup, and replenish their ammunition. The delay of several hours proved fatal. By the time Burnside renewed the advance, Confederate forcements under General A.P. Hill had arrived. They pushed Burnside's troops back to Antietam Creek. By 6 p.m., the battle was over. The two armies held about the same ground as they had when the battle began. Although Antietam has been described as a tactical draw, the Army of Northern Virginia lost 25% of its men. Lee was forced to withdraw to Virginia and abandon his invasion of the North. When the sun finally set on September 17, 1862, more than 23,000 soldiers were either missing or captured or lay dead or wounded on the fields bordering Antietam Creek. It remains the bloodiest one-day battle in American history, and it was the closest thing to a major victory for the Union thus far. President Abraham Lincoln used the outcome to release his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. It announced that all slaves still being held in the rebelling states would be free on January 1, 1863. Going forward, the war would be fought to preserve the Union and end slavery.